It's Monday, the 2nd of July, 2012, and in this Boardroom Talk special podcast, Peggie Droskie, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is with us in studio. The Parliamentary Committee on Labour is going to be getting some contributions from people all over the spectrum for these amendments to the Basic Conditions of Employment Act and the Labour Relations Act. That's a mouthful, Peggie, but what it really means is that the labour operation or the labour legislation in South Africa is going to be amended yet again. You've done a lot of research into this. Perhaps we could start at the beginning. What's from your perspective, from SACCI's perspective, what are you looking for from these amendments, i.e., to do with improving or creating employment in the country?
Well, from a business perspective, we feel that the amendments that have been put on the table are not going to achieve anything that we would like to see achieved in the labour arena within the South African business environment. It's going to make it more expensive, particularly for the smaller and medium-sized enterprises to operate, and it's going to place more onerous conditions on them, whereas we've been calling for a loosening up of the labour regulations in order to facilitate job creation, which is such an important imperative in South Africa.
You mentioned for small and medium enterprises. Are there no special dispensations?
Not in terms of the proposals that are on the table and on which we have commented.
Is there just no appreciation for the role that they play in creating employment?
It appears that government itself recognises that small and medium-sized enterprises are the pivot on which job creation must revolve. But what is coming out in terms of legislation certainly doesn't reflect that recognition.
The Department of Labour has had a roadshow around the country explaining to people what it means. Have you had any feedback from your members, from perhaps small and medium enterprises, what's been going on there?
You know, the small and medium-sized enterprises have got great difficulty in getting out and actually identifying what the real problems for themselves are going to be. So they rely to a large extent on ourselves and organisations such as BUSA to identify the possible impediments that there may be. And we have found that definitely there is going to be a very strong move towards perhaps mechanisation, a reluctance to expand the businesses. And obviously business expansion is needed if we're going to create jobs. So companies are going to be almost stagnating at the size that they are, and maybe not even replacing employees that leave.
So less jobs?
Less jobs.
And this is because of perhaps unintended consequences of the amendments?
We're not sure what the motivation behind it is, other than that South Africa is complying with the requirements of the ILO Decent Work Programme, and Labour has been pushing for the Decent Work Programme to be implemented in South Africa, and that means decent jobs. Now, I think if we have a look at what a labour environment is, it is optimistic to think that every single job that is created is going to be a decent job. And of course, it depends on what one would regard as a decent job, because there are some very dirty jobs which could be regarded as decent jobs in some areas, but others might regard them not as decent jobs.
Help us to understand, what is a decent job? Or what does the ILO say it should be?
The ILO is not really very clear on what a decent job is, and that is part of the problem that we are facing in South Africa. So the focus is not necessarily on what the individual will actually be doing on the job, but rather the conditions which surround the job itself.
So help us through.
Well, if you look at the temporary employment services, we have people who would perhaps be semi-skilled or even skilled. They're on a project, and they are a temporary worker because the project is of a limited duration. So the proposed legislation is that the conditions under which that person is employed must be highly regulated rather than what that person actually does on the job.
So let's understand this. There is a 3-month project.
Yes.
That is required by a company to fulfill. It needs to bring in extra people. How does it go about it, and how's the legislation going to change that?
The 3-month time frame is not too much of a problem. The problem is that the legislation puts in a 6-month time frame. And there are many projects which extend over a 6-month period.
So let's say there's a 9-month project. How would that work?
Well, it means that once the employee has been on that job in a temporary capacity for 6 months, he is then regarded as a permanent employee. And he has to get all the benefits and the feedback that a normal employee would get. In other words, he would have to, if a company runs a medical aid or a pension scheme, he would have to become a member of those schemes. Now, that would add an extra cost to the employer, and the employee himself would have to make the normal company contributions. Now, the problem with that is, if you take just for as an example the medical aid, most medical aids would require that you are actually a member of that medical aid for 3 months before you can actually make a claim. Now, if your project is 9 months and you become a member of the medical aid after 6 months, you're paying for a medical aid service and you're not going to be able to benefit from it.
What are the other implications in a situation like this?
It's difficult to indicate what the real implications are because they would vary from company to company. Each company has got its own set of parameters according to which it works. But this would give the temporary employee the feeling that he has got a permanent job. And if there is a reasonable expectation which is not actually defined, that reasonable expectation means that you may not, in fact, dismiss that employee after that period because he's had a reasonable expectation that the job would be permanent.
So, Peggie, what happens in a case that you have a 9-month contract? That somebody gets a 9-month contract of work, are they going to be treated differently in future?
Yes, that is what the proposed amendments are promoting.
So you can't have say a job's going to take a year, you can't have a 1-year contract anymore?
No. Maximum contract would be 6 months.
The impact of that, I mean, how many people are actually employed for periods of longer than 6 months?
It also depends on the actual contract, the nature of the project. And I'm thinking in terms now of the infrastructure projects, which the South African government is pushing very strongly. Those infrastructure projects certainly are going to last much longer than 6 months. You take longer than 6 months to build a road. Just take how long it's taken to upgrade the road between Pretoria and Johannesburg. It's been years. And that means that those employees, well, I suppose that is not a very good example because they would almost be permanent employees.
All right, but if you're a
subby,
if you're a subby and working on a subcontract and you're working on one of those roads and you've got a project that's going to take you maybe a year, maybe 18 months.
Yes.
Your problem now is that you can't, the way I read you can't put have an 18-month contract with an employee.
No.
Because after 6 months they become permanent. And
Correct.
After 18 months, I guess there goes your profit when you have to retrench them.
Exactly. That is exactly it. And if there had to be any move to go to the CCMA and there is arbitration, the employer would have to put down the equivalent of a 2-year salary before that arbitration would be heard.
Now, surely the unintended consequence of this will be the employment of unregistered workers from other parts of Africa, who we know are plentiful in South Africa, perhaps encouraging people to break the law in an attempt to maybe get around these issues. Is that possible?
Nothing is off the table. That is definitely possible. We already have people who are employed under those conditions. And we have really felt that the temporary employment services arena, certainly, as with any other part of the economy, has got its rats and mice. And the idea behind this is to get rid of those employers which are not treating their staff firmly. So we say bring in regulation which would make it possible for those employers to toe the line, but don't impede the normal activity for temporary employment services that would be part and parcel of normal economic activity.
When I was reading around this various subjects, it is uppermost in many people's thoughts that there are going to be unintended consequences of the amendments. And there was even a proposal from NEDLAC, if I understand correctly, to ask Cabinet to see what these might be. But that doesn't seem to have happened.
No. The idea is, and businesses have been calling for a long, long time, that every time there is a bill which is tabled in Parliament or regulations which are tabled, that they do a regulatory impact assessment in order to see what the unintended consequences could be. The original 4 bills that were tabled in December 2010 certainly did have an RIA attached to it. But the problem is that impact assessment indicated that it would be foolish to go ahead with the suggested amendments, because the unintended consequences would certainly be what we have just been speaking about. The process in NEDLAC has been very long and protracted, and the bills which have been tabled in Parliament are actually quite different to the ones that were originally tabled in 2010. And because of the great differences that there has been a call for a new regulatory impact assessment to be done, and that has not been done.
So we could have these laws being promulgated. We could have unintended consequences of not creation of jobs, but destruction of jobs, all because we are acting too hastily.
Yes. Well, maybe we shouldn't say that we are acting too hastily, because these have been on the table for a long, long time. The big problem with these particular bills is that the minister tabled them at Cabinet before the NEDLAC process was finalised. And the reports that we get from NEDLAC is that government was getting frustrated with the long time that it was taken to come to an agreement within NEDLAC. And if you consider that they were put into NEDLAC in early 2011, and they'd been discussing them at NEDLAC for more than a year, you can understand why there is a sense of frustration that we are not making much progress. But it wasn't only government that was feeling that frustration. Business and labour were also feeling that frustration.
Because it is, when there's uncertainty, of course, that does
Yes.
affect people's expansion and people's ideas of how to invest for the future.
It does.
But Peggie, where are we in this process now? If the legislation is promulgated and there hasn't been a new impact assessment, could we not be doing something that is going to destroy jobs?
We could very well be doing something that will destroy jobs.
And what could stop that?
Well,
What can stop the process now if it's been going on for so long?
the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee has public hearings, and these are due to take place at the end of July, and all stakeholders can go to the Portfolio Committee and present their views, and we intend to do that as well. And I'm sure we're not the only organisation that is going to be doing it. I think they're going to have quite an extensive program where the stakeholders make their presentations. The Parliamentary Portfolio Committee is then obliged to take into account the viewpoints that are expressed at those particular hearings. Whether they, having taken them into account, decide for or against what the stakeholders are saying, it's up to them. And that is the only hope that we have got at the moment.
Well, clearly you are speaking for business, particularly small and medium enterprises. We have Labour, which has its representation. Who speaks for the unemployed?
In the NEDLAC process, there is what they call a community chamber, and they do have representatives there, but it's notoriously difficult to identify who legitimate representatives of the unemployed are, because it's so difficult to organise the unemployed people.
But if we're saying that these amendments are going to destroy further employment and certainly not open up the creation of jobs, then surely somebody should be taking them into account.
Yes. What we have indicated is that it seems to be the view of Labour that they need to protect those of their employees who are currently, their members who are currently employed. And we would have thought that from a Labour perspective, they would have been just as keen to create jobs and to grow the economy as the other sectors, because that would increase their membership base. But it doesn't seem as though they've got that perspective.
Peggie Droskie is the Chief Operating Officer of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry.